Good afternoon and welcome everyone to Interbusiness 445, International Trade and Investment Law. In this course, we're going to look at many of the most essential laws which regulate global commerce and global investment and global trade. And we're also going to look at how those regimes sometimes are gotten around, are changed, and are in the process of changing. That's the dynamic tension, I think, in this course. And looking at who's enrolled, I know many of you, and great to see you here online, but not all of you. And I look forward to getting to know everyone. So let's start with a little story before we get into the nuts and bolts of the course. As I like to say in my other courses, something will probably change in international business over the course of the semester. And in this case, we have a great case which started just a few days ago. On August 19th, President Trump imposed a 50% Section 388 tariffs on Canadian goods, which took effect. And Canada, as being our closest and largest trade partner, was shocked by this. It's been signed by the president on July 20th, and the talks collapsed on August 19th. And the framing of this is a response to alleged discrimination in autos, dairy, and alcohol, but the actual scope, because the relationship is so deep, goes much wider. Wood, chemicals, minerals, food, textiles, general manufactured goods, services, etc. Behind this, which we'll discuss in this course, is the USMCA, the US Mexican-Canada trade agreement. It's not being renewed on its current terms and has a sunset of July 1st, 2036. So there's a lot of talk about trade, even with our closest neighbors, through this lens of the USMCA. And we see this in many other relationships. Right now, the US is having issues with China, has been ongoing, but also with the EU, with India, with many countries in the world, and regions in the world. So there are often frameworks to set the rules and regulations, but the way it's being played out is very different. And that's sort of the key of this course. So the theory, comparative advantage, which we're going to get into this week, which I think most of you have studied, said that we should trade freely and take advantage of what we're good at. The reality is that this is impacting a very long-standing series of very integral relationships in autos, in semiconductors, in all sorts of finished products where the product is bouncing back and forth over the border multiple times. We had an example in San Diego this spring of a machine part that crossed the border 12 times between San Diego and Monterrey in order to complete it. So it's not just the finished products we're talking about. Car parts cross the border 4 to 5 times. This impacts not just big businesses, but family businesses, agricultural businesses, distributors, and it's impacting multi-generations of trust. And what I think the real core of this class is to both learn what is the law and what are the laws. In my view, there's not necessarily such a thing as international law, right? We have things like the WTO and we have regional agreements, but ultimately countries set their own laws. And we even see this sometimes at the state level. So that's just a story to start off with. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Jack Marr. I'm a professor of international business and I direct our international business program here at Boise State. So all of you IB majors get to interact with me in multiple different ways. So before my academic career, I spent 12 years in Asia, largely working on trade issues and investment issues with McKinsey in Greater China. I was at the consulate with the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the Foreign Agricultural Service in Shanghai. I directed our business development, all of our trade relations, government relations, importing of U.S. goods into Japan for a number of years. And then earlier in my career, I was an analyst for the first Wall Street venture capital fund. So I've also worked continually on the investment side, which we'll also talk about. So we have Matthew Conte, whose details are in the course. It'll be your first stop for Canvas, due dates, and course mechanics. With me, right? Contact me about very content related questions, and I'm happy to answer. And if you're not sure who it should go to, just send it to both. And please sort of start the email 445 question in biz 445 so we can find it quickly. So this is the first time that we're teaching this course in this format. So very, very open to feedback. I co-developed this course with Professor Jeff Lingwall, who is a legal expert, right? Went to Yale Law School. And so I think he took a very good legalistic lens on it. And I'm looking at it more from the lens of how businesses are operating on both a macro and micro level vis-a-vis these laws. And they're both really important. And that's, I think, the real dynamic of this. So it'll be the legal and regulatory side plus the IB real firm side. And sometimes these sides align and go together well, and sometimes they don't. And I think it's really a case by case basis and depends on which actor you're talking about, which business, which government, which entity. So some of the things that I'd like you to take away from the course is thinking about the international trading system, the WTO, how it actually works, the regional agreements, the USMCA we already talked about, the CPTPP, which the US opted out of back in 2018, and then multiple bilateral investment treaties. We'll look at these are sort of the bigger picture, the more macro ones. And then we'll think about how basic trade economics apply. And this is something that many of you have taken 230 with me. We've talked a bit about, and we're going to take a deeper dive. Comparative advantage is still at the core. Those of you who've taken my 230 know that I believe in it, and my belief is that governments often intervene, and that's a lot of what this course is about. We'll think a lot about exchange rate dynamics and how different arbitrage within exchange rates can sort of drive the decision-making process. And we'll also think about who wins and who loses in all of these. Then we're going to think a lot about how to analyze cross-border transactions and or disputes. And this is getting more into the legalistic area. What body of law applies? And it's not always that obvious because in international business, you're by nature talking about at least two countries. And what the contract says and what happens is not always the same thing. We're going to think about tracing jurisdictional paths, which is a related issue to that. And I think most importantly, we're going to think about how can you analyze and anticipate possible risk points in deals uh, that you are doing in the future through looking at cases that are happening now or have happened in the past. And there's lots and lots of cases, and we'll look at a number of them. We're going to evaluate whether a government trade measure is legal. This has become a big deal, particularly in the US. There's a lot of pushback against these macro agreements, the WTO, the USMCA, all of these treaties, against both, and also the regional, the national, and a new area, not new, but I would say an area that's really emerged, especially in the past 8 years or so, is the national security aspect. We've always had like the CFIS, and we've had a number of regimes to regulate export of technology, export of certain products, especially around defense and aerospace. But the scope of national security is increasing. And this is really important. Those of you who know me know I do a lot of work on AI and on quantum computing. So there's all sorts of new questions that are coming out of this beyond sort of the traditional questions around semiconductors, around weapons, around dual use technology, something that can be used both for commercial and military purposes. And that's something which I expect to continue to grow. Drones is another example, right? There's China has recently started to block U.S. purchases of DJI drones, which are the sort of the cheapest, best on the market. So there's many examples of this. And we're going to think about the ethics around trade and investment. We want you to learn to defend a reasoned position and not just repeat a slogan, and think about the competing values. And there's always competing values: efficiency, sovereignty, labor, environment, human rights, etc. And build arguments that account for those tensions. And what I'd like to see you do is thinking about all of the business goals and the legal frameworks and the regulatory frameworks. Think about sort of where you land on these issues and how you can sort of build your own ethics about this. So, a little bit more about the nitty-gritty. So, we're going to have 15 modules. This is fully asynchronous, divided into four parts. So, we won't meet together, although I'm sure I'll see many of you in the halls or in other classes during the semester. So, the first part is basically about the economic foundations, and we're going to do what's probably going to be a bit of a review for you, but I want you to start thinking really about how this fits into the legal frameworks, why countries trade, exchange rates, and trade policy instruments. So things that we talked about in 230, but start thinking about the legal aspects. And then weeks 4 to 7, we're going to talk about international law foundations. What are the sources and structures? The WTO, which grew out of the GATT, dispute settlement mechanisms, and the TRIPS for international intellectual property, regional trade agreements. And then we will have a midterm. The midterm is largely being able to nail some definitions, which I think are essential vocabulary in being able to have a conversation in your future careers about this. And don't worry, we'll have plenty of time to prepare. I want to see everyone succeed in this. Then the third part, we're going to talk about national level law and regulation. So in week 8, we're going to talk about customs, and everyone's going to do an individual project. Talk more about that. You'll come up with a proposal. Week 9, we're going to talk about U.S. tariff law, which, as we said in the intro, is changing very rapidly, very likely to change quite a bit just over the course of the semester. Then we're going to talk about trade remedies and export controls. Export controls, the U.S. has been using them more and more, not just with China, but also with Russia, with more and more countries. And what's interesting that those of you who know me, I'm quite a China scholar. China has started to also implement more and more countermeasures, including export controls. So this is something we see very much escalating. And then in week 11, we're going to talk about investment law, right? For foreign direct investments, equity investments, other types of investments, and do a project outline. So that's something I also have a lot of experience with. Part 4, we're going to talk about private law and dispute resolution. So the goal is to avoid disputes, but they do happen. We're going to talk about the CASG. We're going to talk about services and digital, which is growing very quickly. We're going to focus in on dispute resolution. And then we're going to finish up thinking about the system under stress. So we're going into this with the system under stress. So that is a sort of a fundamental underlying belief. And I think I should note at now that just because the US decides to pull out of aspects of the system doesn't mean that everyone else is going to do that. You don't see this. I was in Europe twice for over a month this summer. You do not see this same sentiment in Europe. I don't necessarily think you see it as much in Latin America. China's building its own set of trade regimes. Japan, Korea, other countries are also sort of rethinking where they fit into this. So it's a very interesting time. So the weekly rhythm, right? We have some videos, which I'm making sure that they're interesting and on point, and some readings, which will give you some of the core ideas. Should be done by Wednesday at 11:59. Keeps you on pace. They're all up for week one, and we're going to continue to edit them through the course. And then you have an AI-based skills assignment. This is fun. It's sort of using AI in a gamified way to think through some of the problems we're discussing in this course. I think it's a great exercise. And obviously, you can use whichever AI you like to do this. And it's fun. The first one is you're sort of a board game exporter, and you want to think about how comparative advantage plays out. I've played these, and they're fun. The grading. The discussion boards are going to be worth 300 points, AI assignment 240, final project 130, midterm 150, and the final 180. So we estimate that the workload should be probably about 7 to 8 hours a week once you're in rhythm, right? You don't have to memorize everything, right? I really want you to focus in on what is the most interesting to you, but come away with a broad set of definitions. There's no textbook. Everything is up on Canvas. And as I said, this is the first time that we're teaching this version of this class. And those of you who know me know I'm very open to suggestions, and we can sort of make changes. So, some more mechanics, right? Put INTRBIS 445 in your email subject lines. Um, AI is, uh, you will definitely use it to do the AI-based assignments. For the discussion boards, give you sort of three options. You can do a current event, or you can do sort of one of the discussion questions within the readings, or you can do sort of a more essay type look at one of the problems. For this, if you just put in a single prompt and come up with a bad answer, it's not going to cut the mustard that's in the rubric, right? AI should be a tool, not the endpoint. And those of you who know me know I do a lot of AI stuff, so my AI radar is pretty well trained. But you can use it as I like to think of AI as something iterative, right? You can have it help you push along an idea or part of an idea, and then you go in and you do your own work, right? And then you can have AI check you, right? But AI, single prompt, single answer is in coding we say garbage in, garbage out, right? So please don't do that, right? The midterm and the final is going to be closed book, right? But you can bring 2 pages of handwritten notes. I wouldn't sweat it. It's not too hard. Late work policy, I'll be 10% a day, and then that will cap at 50%. And then we'll see. Please get your work done on time so you can, because the course does, I think, build on itself as you go through the semester. We'll try to get the grades returned to you as soon as possible so you know how you're doing, right? And we have very detailed rubrics for all the assignments. Make sure you read the rubric. It'll give you an exact picture of what we're expecting in terms of the grading. And if anyone has any suggestions about the rubric, again, I'm open to that. Or the way we're structuring the assignments, I've already changed them around a little bit. I'm happy to do that some more. So first week, right? This is what you're going to start right away. Why countries trade, right? So talk about the production possibility frontier, comparative advantage, absolute advantage, intra-industry trade, and the benefits of reducing trade barriers. And I've put some more videos up there, which I think are interesting. One is an interview which includes me, right, about a Idaho-based company that was hit really hard by Trump's earlier tariffs, doing business with Southeast Asia, and then another one about China EVs. Which has been sort of the big topic in Europe, and thinking about how the tariff regimes can deal with these super cheap, high quality EVs. The readings then are some basics of international trade. Um, and This will give you largely as I said, sort of a review, but I'd like you to start thinking, how does this fit into the legal frameworks, which we're going to talk about later. So by next Sunday, by next week, we need to have the readings and the videos watched and done, do the AI-based skills assignment, and do the discussion board. And those of you who know me once again know that I like current events. So feel free to pick a current event that's relevant to the topics that we're talking about. And you're welcome for the first week to use the optional videos as a basis for your discussion board. Um, and sort of see how these things have changed since the videos. They're pretty recent, but what's changed since then? Um, I'm looking forward to this course, right? I think that this matters right now in a way it hasn't in a very long time because the regimes are all changing so quickly. So any questions, you can post them in the course question board if they're general, right? For getting in touch with me. Right, email is generally the best. I try to solve problems via email. And if not, we can have a meeting, but don't I would suggest not just suggesting a meeting. I think we can solve most issues via email. And look forward to your work. We're going to highlight some of the top work at the beginning of each new week is one of the goals. And I'll see you guys in module two, the exchange rates and currency markets. Have a great rest of your day.